request recording from you. Can you handle the recording?
Yes, we're recording now.
Awesome.
Hi, Fluffy.
Okay, let's jump into this. Thank you guys for jumping on and being part of this conversation today. It's been interesting over the last couple weeks, to say the least, for all of us, kind of figuring out not only what's going on, but also figuring out, okay, well, what's a normal business cadence for me? And a lot of you probably spent several days in your pajamas thinking, this cannot be my new norm. And finally, it get to a point of where they're like, okay, I'm going to get dressed. I'm going to start acting like a true business professional. I will admit, I am in love with my slippers. I'm dressed normal, clean and showered, but I still love wearing my house slippers. Hey, Robert's got them too.
Funny.
Yes, they're the best, right?
Yeah.
I got to have my slippers on. And my kids know, like, if they want to play a trick on me, they hide my slippers.
Yep.
So for the most part, I'm ready for business, except for my slippers. It's been interesting for me, though, as I've talked to a lot of agents over the last couple of weeks, and I'm getting different responses from different agents on how to engage. This is not a time for us to retreat as agents. Yes, we have to be sensitive to the situation that's going on, because this is an unprecedented time. It is an interesting time, and there's a lot of us that are sitting in a place of uncertainty as well. But it is time for us to show up for our clients as they need us to show up. We don't drive how they want us to show up. We need to figure out, how do we show up in a way they want us to show up and be a guide. So I don't know how many of you love the show, or I shouldn't say love the show, but like the show with Bear Grylls, where he takes a celebrity out into the woods, and basically they show up in some random place, and he's going to teach them how to survive out in an environment they've never been in. And they kind of come out and look around, and they're looking around like, I see where I'm at, but I don't know what to do. And that's where Bear Grylls comes in and says, okay, this is what we're going to do. Let me help you calibrate where you're at, and let's make some decisions together to get where we want to go. In essence, that's kind of like what I envision our clients doing right now. They're sitting in a huge place of uncertainty, and they're trying to draw conclusions on what their next best move is that's going to help them get to where they want to go, but they don't know where to get that guidance. And they're waiting for someone to come offer that guidance for them. And we're going to kind of walk through that today. One thing that I think we need to be careful of is, it's not our place to go give directions of, hey, this is what's going to happen and this is what you need to do, because it's different for everybody. But we shouldn't shy away from asking the right questions and giving the guidance along the way, if that makes sense. So for the format of our conversation today, because I do want to open it up to what specific questions you're getting, and I want to role play those with you, but I want to walk through some foundational principles that the majority of our scripts are going to come back to, in helping illustrate the foundational principles of how we're going to come out the other side of this. So let me share my screen here, and we're going to walk through some foundational principles, and then we're going to move into some Q&A and role play. And Rusty and Robert and Joe are going to help me. Get ready, guys, because I'm going to call on you randomly. Okay, so the first thing before we jump into the business aspect of this, obviously I do not want to get away from the number one basic human need is, we need to make sure that their health is good, their family's safe, because if we go right into trying to uncover a problem or fix a problem for them, that's going to feel disingenuous. So yes, I don't want to go away from leading with the conversation of, how's your family? How are things? How's your health? Is there anything you need? Jackie, I see a couple comments coming through as well. Will you watch for any comments or questions popping up and just interrupt me if we need to address one along the way?
Okay.
And then our number two priority is, we got to get away from just asking the question, is there anything I can do for you? That feels like a very safe question. But going back to the comment around Bear Grylls with these people is, they're going to say, there's nothing you can do for me, or I can't think of anything right now, or I think we're good. It's because they don't know what to ask for. And so I believe it's our job to come with some ideas to the table of what we can do to help them instead of just asking them, what can I do for you? So there's a couple things that we need to break down here. And if any of you have seen the show Chicken Little, there's a lot of people that are kind of filling in that world right now that they think because a couple things feel uncertain or there's some element of fear of what's going on in the world, that everything is broken, everything's a mess. And I think we need to, and I'm doing this myself as I get these questions, is I'm asking myself first of, what do I know with certainty? What is it that I do know? And then I'm going to say, what don't I know? Because there's a lot of things that I already do know. And then I just need to look at the variables of what that looks like. So in essence, what we do know are the economic principles. The pandemic that we're going through right now and the recession that's starting right now is outside of our control. There's nothing we can do to physically get in front of it and stop it, but we know that economic principles are driving that. And those economic principles have been true in every upswing and downswing of every economic upturn or downturn, and they're going to remain true. So we need to lean on our understanding of those economic principles. And then the things we don't know are all the variables that are coming into it. Now, I hear a lot of people asking the question, is this recession going to be just like the one in 2007? But the variables are completely different, and we'll talk a little bit about those. And some things are going to react the same and some things are going to react different. It's a matter of those variables. So let's talk for a minute about what we do know, because this will help build, when you're having a conversation with a client, this is going to help you build back to some foundational principles that sound familiar to them, which will be the basis for you building them back up to where you can guide them to the next step. So what are some things that we do know? So number one is we know what the health and condition of the market was before this pandemic. And we know what the drivers were, the foundational principles that drove us to that healthy market. We knew that population was growing at a very fast pace in the state of Utah. We know job growth was growing at a faster pace in Utah than almost any other state. We know unemployment was very, very low, et cetera, et cetera. So we have that knowledge of what the market was just a few weeks ago. We also know that supply prior to the pandemic was very low in the state of Utah, meaning there weren't a lot of houses on the market. The months of supply was low. We also know that demand was high. We had a lot of buyer demand due to increased income. We also had a lot of demand due to a lot more population coming into the state. So, and you guys have heard me talk about affordability over and over and over again. Affordability is driven by median income, which we know median income was high. There's some uncertainty around that, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. Median priced homes, the price of our houses were continuing to increase, but at a healthy rate. And interest rates have remained low. We saw a little spike in interest rates, but we can anticipate that interest rates most likely are going to stay competitive, at least for the time being, as we get back to an economic standard. At that point, we probably will see interest rates increase. So that being said, let's talk about what we don't know. We know what the market was, but we know what conditions drove that market condition. The big question becomes, how are those same elements going to show up on the other side of this? And we're already seeing them be affected a little bit. But let's talk through some of these variables. So the health of the market after the pandemic is, we got to understand the drivers, how that's going to show up are going to be the same. Population increase is going to have a big impact on it. What's going to happen with job growth? So if we think about this for a minute, there's a very high likelihood from my perspective, and Robert, Joe, and Russie, chime in if you guys feel differently. There's a very high likelihood that our net in-migration is going to stay consistent in the state of Utah. In fact, part of me thinks it's going to actually increase because there's going to be more people wanting to move out of these high populated areas that are getting hit much harder than us and move to a more rural, safer setting. So I imagine that our population growth is going to remain constant.
Yeah, I think California, if you're just talking about California and them repealing certain tax breaks that they've been getting on real estate, I think you'll start to see a big portion of California just continue to go. I mean, they may not land just here in Utah, they'll go other places as well. But I would say that especially the coastal states, you'll see them continue to drive this way.
And you look at the health of the like a California economy versus a Utah economy, it's going to be much harder recovery for a state that was already struggling economically in some ways to recover, as opposed to a state that was very economically sound prior to this, if that makes sense. So from a certainty standpoint, I don't have very much uncertainty around there still being population growth in the state of Utah. We're already behind on the number of homes we need in the state of Utah, which will shift our conversation to buyer demand in a few minutes. The big uncertainty is job growth, meaning how many new jobs are being created. Unemployment, which is how many of those current jobs are being filled. Those are our big uncertainties, which I'll illustrate that here in a second. Let's break down affordability a little bit. So median income, what's going to happen to median income on the other side of this? This is where we don't know. We can't put a time frame on this to say, oh, in 30 days this is going to happen, or 60 days this is going to happen. Other than putting a time frame on it, we need to be watching for some specific triggers. We don't know when those triggers are going to happen. For example, Rusty and I were having a conversation yesterday around this topic. And just to make sure I was thinking through it right, I asked Rusty some questions of like, okay, from your perspective, what are some of these triggers that once we start hearing some good news are going to start introducing back consumer confidence? Rusty, tell us a little bit about a couple of those things we talked about that we identified as triggers.
So we talked through some of those triggers are going to be things like a date the kids are going to go back to school. When that happens, restaurants start to open back up a little more limitedly. They start to allow group gatherings, the small groups again, church groups meeting, all of those things. And really, I think once we see that shelter in place order start to get lifted and people are able to see, oh, hey, we are going to get to the other side of this. We start to see declines in numbers of cases going down instead of going up. Those are the kind of things that I think we'll be able to go, okay, now we start to see that the triggers are going to happen to get consumer confidence back.
Beautiful. And I think it's going to be interesting as we start getting some of that news that we're going to see the early adopters of a little bit of good news is like, I'm all in. A little bit of news for some people is going to be like, this sounds good, but let's see. And then the next layer of good news comes, and there'll be the slower adopters too, if that makes sense. So only time will tell on the median income piece, but something to think about. Forgive my rudimentary drawings, but this is my attempt at drawing these out. Is if you look at this graph, realistically, if you look across the bottom, the time to recovery, the longer this takes for us to recover and turn the market around, or at least start getting some of those triggers back in, the number of jobs lost is going to continue to increase. Even with the economic stimulus coming in, that's really it's a good Band-Aid. It's a really good Band-Aid. I'm excited about it, but it's going to stretch this out hopefully long enough for there to be some normalcy that we fall back into some element of normal. But if it's not a big enough Band-Aid, at some point people will start having to get rid of more jobs. Entrepreneurs may lose their businesses if this stretches out too long. Now, I will tell you my personal opinion is that we're going to come out of this in the next few months. And I think that stimulus package actually is going to help be a sufficient Band-Aid for getting us back on track. But we'd be remiss to ignore that it is a possibility that this drags on longer and that Band-Aid is not big enough to fix the problem fast enough, which could create a bigger problem down the road. As a potential, I don't think that's the case, but we'd be remiss not to say that's a possibility. If you look at this graph, I've kind of drawn in red what the stimulus package is going to do to this. It's basically buying us time. It's giving us more time to recover economically with less of an impact on our economy. Any questions or comments on that?
I just have one quick comment, Marcus. One of the things you and I talked about, which I think is worth mentioning right now in this specific conversation, is just like you said, a lot of the entrepreneurs, the smaller businesses, the less established businesses are going to have a harder time recovering the longer this goes on, which again leads to job loss, right? Because a business that came in, they hit the market with a splash, they have all these employees, they have whatever, and if they're not established enough, they didn't have a great financial backing, whatever it is, The longer that goes on, again, we're going to see more impact from that. And especially the people that, I mean, I think if you look at it in a real estate standpoint, it's going to be the people that aren't continuing to build their business right now. They're pulling their head under the covers and saying, it's a snow day and I don't want to work because I don't want to talk to anybody. And those people are going to have even a harder recovery, because the longer you let that lapse and that piece of time pass without working in your business, you're going to have a bigger issue down the road.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Rusty. I just wanted to point out the fact that,
Everyone hear
say that
Robert
again?
say that?
Huh?
Repeat that. Wait, one more time.
You make great points all the time, Rusty. I don't know why you're saying that.
Just kidding.
Well, I think it's interesting because we talk about job loss, but from as how that impacts real estate, that doesn't always mean less real estate. A lot of times that means, downsizing. So now all of a sudden we're selling high-end homes, and now those same people are buying lower-end homes because their income has just dropped. So looking back to the other economic shifts, very rarely does it really impact number of sales in real estate. It ends up taking a bite out of the appreciation of real estate, right? Because you have a lot of people downsizing. So it's not always just full unemployment. It's people that lose their jobs and then get back into the workforce, which, if we go back to the fundamentals of what we do know, is that the economy fundamentally was strong to begin with, right? And we're going to adapt to this. I think it's going to be interesting to just see that as that unemployment wave comes and then goes, real estate, it might we just have to adjust to where our focus is. And that's where we don't know where that focus is one of those things that I just don't know either.
And Marcus.
Yeah, go.
So a couple of weeks ago on 60 Minutes, I know you and I talked about that, but they had the chief economist for the Federal Reserve on, and he said the last one that we had in 2008, the thing that took the most amount of time to recover for our economy was employment. That's why you see them doing everything they can do to try to save employment, because the longer this goes and the more people that are unemployed, the longer it's going to take for all of us to get back. And we were just on a call with Johnny Christensen, and he was saying he was on the phone with Gary Keller, and Gary Keller says he thinks that we could possibly see 25% unemployment out of this that's happening. That's where the key is going to be, is how fast are they going to be able to get back to work for the economy to get as strong as it possibly can be.
Agreed. Yeah. So I think there's a couple great points, everyone. Thank you for chiming in there. I think there's some, it's going to be really interesting. And a good friend of mine who is the author of the book, The Start of Something Stupid, Richie Norton. I saw a post he made on social media even like a month and a half ago. This was maybe 6-8 weeks ago. And he made a post that said, you don't realize it yet, but the rest of your world will be measured in pre-coronavirus and post-coronavirus. And he got so much flack, like people making fun of him, saying you're way off the mark, this is not a big deal. But there is truth to that, is the way business is going to be done after, not just our memory of what this is, but the way business is going to be done, the way the consumer perceives value, the consumer's needs, the way the consumer makes consumer decisions on what they want to buy, what they find value in, is all going to look different after this. So I know this isn't the topic of our conversation, but part of this has got to be, if the consumer's needs and views are changing, are my business practices and principles and values changing to match the post-coronavirus world? And that has got to be part of this daily conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Jed and I last week, I was like, he says, what can I do for you? This is my husband, for those of you who don't know me. And I was like, I just want my old world back like 3 weeks ago. And he goes, never going to happen, babe. We're past it. Get used to the new normal. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, we're not going back. So the next piece of the what we don't know, the variable piece, is median price of homes. So this is a lot of the questions you guys sent me, which we'll role play these questions in a few minutes, had to do around, well, what is this going to do to the value of my home? So from the foundational economic principle, we got to remember that price is only a result of supply and demand. So we can't lean away from this. And anyone that's asking those questions around, well, I'm losing all this equity in my house, or I'm scared I'm going to buy today and not be able to sell tomorrow, is we've got to be able to pull this conversation back to the foundational principle and help people understand what supply and demand and how it's going to affect the value of homes moving forward. Another rudimentary graph for myself is when inventory is high over here, we know that buyer demand is very low. When inventory is low, we know that buyer demand is high, meaning the more buyers that are out constantly looking for houses, they're picking them up as fast as they come on the market. That's why you've seen days on the market within Utah being under 30 or right around 30 days on the market, where a lot of the country it's been a little bit higher than that, but still a very buyer dominant or seller dominant market. So if you look at this as historically, as inventory is low, buyer demand high, prices tend to go up. Oppositely, when inventory is high and buyer demand is low, that's where people start dropping their prices to say, I've got to reduce my price to attract a buyer. There's less buyers in the marketplace, more competition among sellers, let me start dropping my price. So this is an important conversation because in essence, we're going to be, as we start getting those positive economic triggers, kids can go back to school. You're going to see less people wearing masks at Home Depot. You're going to see restaurants saying, yeah, come on in. You can eat in here now. That's going to happen at some point. We don't know when, but when it does, we're going to walk back into the market. And at that moment, it's going to be interesting to measure what is the pent up buyer demand of people kind of gauging their circumstances through this and then saying, there is positive economic triggers. What position am I in to move? So just to give some ideas around this is something we've been putting together daily for you. I truly believe that really 80% of real estate agents right now, if I called them and asked them the question, how many homes are selling on the market right now? I really believe 80% of agents are totally unplugged right now or more of basically saying, no, nothing's happening in real estate. Just meaning they're not selling anything in real estate. They're assuming that nobody is selling anything in real estate. Now, these numbers are lower than they were a year ago, but in some areas, in some circumstances, they haven't dropped from where they were a year ago in some element. Look at this in listings taken. The red line is Weber and Davis County. Yesterday alone, there were 60 listings taken. Day before, 50-something listings taken. Day before, 48. So in the last 3 days, we've seen this happen. Salt Lake, we see 80, almost 90, 110 listings taken yesterday in Salt Lake. Washington County, which we know is a much smaller market, but you can see 25, 29, 32 in 3 days. That's 100 listings in Washington County in the last 3 days. So there's two pieces of this of saying, hey, there still is an element of business going on. We can't shy away from the conversation. It's can I go fill the need? Because if 80% of agents don't know this is happening, that means almost 100% of the public think there is nothing happening in the real estate world right now. They think we're on complete shutdown. And on the other side of this, you can look on closed units, same thing. Closed units are happening, less of a pattern to it, but their closed units are still happening. There's people buying property. So let me talk for a minute specifically around buyer demand, because in my mind, the two biggest questions that we don't know the answer to is how long? How long is it going to take before we start hearing those positive economic triggers that we talked about? And then on the other side of that, what does buyer demand look like? Now, buyer demand at that time is going to be what position are people in financially? Are they still lendable? What is their view of value in the market? The longer that goes, the more uncertainty there will be with that. The shorter time frame we can fill, buyer demand could still potentially be high. But if you think about, particularly here in Utah, and I know we have some people outside of Utah on the call and watching this as well, but particularly in Utah, we know that there's still a lot of sellers that need to sell. We know that there's still a lot of people coming into the state. We still know we're behind on inventory, and we had a lot of pent-up buyer demand before this happened. If you look at this graph, this pie graph, if you imagine that this pie, 100% of this pie was the pool of buyers before the pandemic hit. Well, this has changed a little bit to look like this. The same pool of buyers now is really broken into 3 categories. And if you have another category you want to add to this, that's great. But in my mind, there's 3 specific categories that I'm breaking these people into. And they could be the same people on a seller's, from a pool of sellers as well. So as we moved into some of this scripting, in my mind, the first thing I'm going to do in my conversation with this person after I've made sure that their health and safety is taken care of is I'm going to determine which one of these categories do they fall into. Number 1 is in green here. There's still a portion of these buyers and sellers that have an urgent need. It's not they don't have the luxury of waiting. They might be, I've already sold my house. I was already under contract on this house. I moved here for a job. Whatever it is, there's still transactions happening, and there's some people that have an urgent need. And we cannot ignore that on both the selling side and the buy side. Second piece in red here is I've categorized them as we've eliminated their need. So notice I drew this in at 25%. I don't know what the percentage, and every day it's probably changing a little bit. And depending on what your sphere or your pipeline looks like, it's probably a different percentage. But the idea behind this is there's a portion of people that this pandemic has actually taken away the current opportunity for them to either buy or sell. They've already lost their job and thus can't get a loan, or they've decided not to move, or they've moved in with their parents. There's things where they may have been in a position to buy or sell a few days ago or a few weeks ago, but now are currently in an eliminated outside of, I don't have that current need now. So we have to accept that. Franklin, I see a hand going up. You got a comment there?
I really like that. And in light of the pandemic, this looks a lot like a triage chart where the urgent are the ones that need the most urgent care. And the uncertain is they may or may not survive. And the eliminated are the ones you put a toe tag on. And if you look at what you've got here, you're looking at your urgent is about 20%. So there again is the 80-20 rule. And so this is where you have to spend your time is on those urgent, most viable opportunities.
Yeah, I think we if we don't have the conversations, we're going to lose the urgents because they're going to go to who's talking to them.
Right.
And what I don't want you to get from this graph is that we should ignore the eliminated, because the real game here is not who do I talk to and who don't I talk to. The real game here is if I got to bring specific value to them, I need to understand which category they're in. It does me no good to talk to someone that just lost their job about, hey, let me show you the houses that just came on the market yesterday. That's not what they need to hear. But the uncertain group doesn't, in my mind, isn't I'm uncertain on whether they're going to buy or sell. The uncertain part for me is they're living in a world of uncertainty. They don't know their next move because they don't have a guide helping them understand what's going on. And that for me is the underlying message that we're going to go through today is we need to answer a question with more questions from the perspective of a guide that's supported with the economic foundational principles to help them make the next best decision. So something real quickly to keep in mind with this is notice I just put across the bottom of the screen to identify the triggers that will open the floodgate. So something to think about with buyers and sellers. Let's say that tomorrow, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but let's say in 2 weeks, the governor comes out and says, okay, we're going back to school on May 15th. He may or may not, but let's say that he comes out and says, we're going back to school on May 15th. Rusty's got her fingers crossed. Well, at that day, that means May 16th, the buyers could call Robert and say, I want to go see houses tomorrow. I feel good about it. There's a positive economic trigger. I'm ready to go. So a buyer will go. Here's a problem we're going to run into, though, is if a seller waits until that same announcement, that same economic trigger, and calls Robert the same day to say, hey, this looks good. I want to list my house. The buyer and the seller aren't going to match up because the buyer is ready to go could potentially be ready to go that day. But a seller will have the conversation with Robert here. Robert will walk through the house and say, hey, we need to paint this room. We need to get rid of all your junk. And they're actually 2-3 weeks out before they get on the market, when that gate was opened and there's buyers now, increased activity from the buyers here. So we got to be having the conversations with the clients to help them understand the timing of the market as it relates to a lot of sellers that think they're going to sell as the market gets better, should actually be getting into contract with you now and getting some counsel on how to get their house ready to match up with when the buyers are actually entering the market at a faster pace.
That goes back into the scripting, right? That goes into the conversations we're having with our clients now. If you follow the positive present, negative present, negative future, positive future, if you're going through that sales scenario, if I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but the idea is that when you're having these conversations with these database or contacts where they're in a negative present, we need to find out, are they in a positive future where they think, oh, hey, things are good, or are they in a negative future? If they're in a negative future, we got to dive into that and find out, okay, is it a negative future in real estate, or is it a negative future in, right, whether they're eliminated or urgent, right? So we need to find out whether that we're going to eliminate them. And that sounds horrible because we're just talking to them like a number, but that idea is that these conversations have to get us hyper aware. We can't simply say this is an A, B, or C lead because we use the buyer pre-qualification questions, right? It's a level deeper into that we have to go now, so that when the floodgates open, these trigger moments happen, we know quickly in our database or our pipeline which ones we're going after.
Exactly.
Marcus?
Go ahead.
So one of the other things too is I want everybody to be aware of when Stacy and I were living in Chico and that huge Paradise fire came through, right? And it looked terrible. The people that had their homes on the market at the time that happened, or were in the position to have their houses on the market, they were getting 20, 30, 40 multiple offers on properties where they were getting $75,000 over asking price. Now, there are going to be a lot of qualified buyers that are going to be ready to buy after this is over. So if you have these listings that are sitting there waiting, when this time is ready to shift, like Marcus was saying, your sellers are going to benefit way more than I think that they understand they're going to benefit out of this situation.
Beautifully said. One last comment on this graph is if this is the buyers and this is the sellers, we're trying to get them to line up and come on the market at the appropriate time. If I had a third hand, it would be over here. And that third hand would be real estate agents. Because if you think about it, the economic triggers that we're talking about are going to come out. And what also is going to happen when those positive economic triggers come back around is that's when 80% of real estate agents are going to climb out of their covers and decide not to wear their jammies moving forward. And they're going to start making calls at that point thinking, oh, buyers and sellers are ready to go again. But they're going to be sorely disappointed when they call someone and be like, where were you over the last 4 weeks when Franklin has been calling me and asking me and guiding me through this process and help me understand, and now you're showing up? It's the same thing as the activities we're taking now are going to determine the strength of your business and the strength of your value and what the rest of your year looks like. This is, as we go through this process, and I encourage you to watch for our follow-up conversations, this is not, let's just pick up your business plan as we allocated it in November when we put it together, is we're going to be, right now, the number one thing is how are we having more conversations and more of the right conversations and establishing ourselves as the guide to our clients. And the next step of this is how do we recalibrate our business plan to drive from now to the end of the year. It's a completely
Hey, Marcus, one of the questions in the chat box is, are you saying hold off on listing a house?
Great question. So the answer to that is, it depends. Does that seller live in urgent, eliminated, or uncertain? So I'm going to pin that for 1 minute and we're going to role play it in just 1 minute, Robert. And you're going to role play it with me. So I'd love to. If any of you have girls at home, we watch Frozen 2 all the time at my house. So to end this part of the conversation before we move into this role playing, the idea behind this is we identify if we can help people identify, are you urgent? Are you in a position where you cannot do anything, or you view that you can't do anything, or you live in a world of uncertainty? Our job in that conversation is not to fix everything in that 5-minute conversation. It's helping them understand, what is the next right thing? What is the next thing I can do to help you understand this differently? And then it's creating this systematic follow-up of, hey, you know what? I read an article yesterday that I think you'd find a lot of value in. Right after this call, I'm going to send it to you. You send them the article. 2 days later, hey, I'm following up. Did you get a chance to read that article? Did that help you better understand what was going on in the market? Awesome. Based on that, did it change your view? Awesome. What's the next right thing? And let's move into that. I know that's a little cheesy. I live in a house, and if you have little girls at home, call Princess Anna. And I do it purposely with my kids, and it drives them nuts when I call her Anna instead of Anna, because apparently that's a huge difference. But I really like the principle behind that. Any questions or comments around that conversation before we actually do some role play?
I just have to say it's really easy to contact your SOI right now and talk to about what's going on too. And then also mention our virtual client event coloring contest.
Yes, we are going to talk about that as a very, very easy way to connect with your people. So we're going to talk about how do we answer specific questions. And then we're also going to talk about what are some ideas of ways that you can take the conversation to your client in a very friendly, non-threatening way. This is such an easy conversation. It blows me away how many people are leaning out of it instead of leaning into that conversation. So let's role play and jump into this. Do we want to go, Rusty, from your perspective, should we talk about ideas around like the client appreciation event and taking ideas to our clients first, or should we dive into some of these questions and role play them out? Oh, you're on mute.
Gosh, sorry. I think we should actually just do a quick, like, how do you reach out if they don't have questions? Because the other ones are question specific. Not everybody's going to have a specific question for you or something that you're answering. So I would say let's have a conversation on what are some ways you can just reach out to your people and just the care touches, if you will.
Beautiful. Do you want to lead or do you want me to lead that?
I can lead. Do you want me to, or do you want to? I don't care.
Let's arm wrestle over it. Why don't you and or Shauna talk about the client appreciation event, but let me lay the foundation for that piece of it. So I found that over the last couple of weeks, as this was all very, very new, and I'm in no way suggesting we're in some element of normalcy now, but when this all was new, it felt very disingenuous to talk about anything but, hey, are you guys okay? I think now we're getting to a point where, yes, we still need to lead with, are you and your family okay? Is everyone's health good? Do you have what you need? But I think we're remiss to not push the conversation into the next piece of, do you have any questions around the market? So we need to have touches of, can I create the platform for a question so that I can answer the questions? Or can I reach out in a way to just provide specific value activities that they're getting value from me? So one of the ideas that we put together that a lot of you are already participating in, that you could take an element of this idea, is some element of a virtual client appreciation event, which we're doing in place of our Easter egg hunt right now. Rusty, do you want to give us just like a quick snapshot of what that is and what it looks like as an example?
Yeah, so we put together just a quick, not quick, but we put together a virtual event for a reason to just reach out and talk to people and also give them something kind of just positive and happy to have a conversation around, right? So our virtual event is a virtual coloring contest. You could really do this with any type of event, but we chose a coloring contest. There's age groups because we did this because the Easter egg hunt was geared towards families with kids. That's where the conversation goes for an Easter egg hunt. So this is something in place of, the point of a client event is to reach out and talk to your clients. So we did this as an exchange of being able to reach out and talk to our clients about an Easter egg hunt. It gives us a reason to reach out and be able to connect with people. It's a virtual virtual coloring contest where there's different age groups. We have a website they can go to, click on their age group to determine what they need to do to enter. And then it's just a way to interact with them and give them something kind of fun to do. We're going to give away prizes.
It's been a lot of fun to see how many people are using the hashtag KWColor already. We're getting a lot of submissions and a lot of interaction with that. So that's a great example of a way to reach out and promote some activity. Zenny, I see you on the call. I see that you're doing customized masks that you're sending out to your clients, which I think is a great idea. I talked to Eric Sanesteven this morning. He's doing some virtual exercise videos that he's leading exercises on Facebook for people that want at-home exercises. And I talked to him a little bit today about, hey, who else in your sphere it cooks healthily or something that you can have on as a guest now. So it's all thinking about how do I bring value to the table now? So this is just one element or example of how to do that. Go ahead, Rusty.
The whole point of this is think outside of the box a little bit. I mean, like we keep saying is we don't know how long this is going to last that we can't physically meet with people. So think outside of the box and come up with fun ideas, come up with something that you were already doing for your clients and take it to a different level and make it virtual.
Love it. And a quick shout out to Shauna Winters, who's on the call, as this was her idea of doing a group-wide virtual client appreciation event, which has been beautiful and was a great example of her leadership. So thank you, Shauna. So let's now jump into some specific questions, because if you're, for example, if I called and invited someone to do the client appreciation coloring contest with their kids, I could easily transition the question or the conversation into, do you have any questions? And one of the best ways to transition this is not to say, hey, just wanted to find out, do you have any questions about the market? That seems like an easy question, yet you got to remember that even when you have a relationship with someone, they know you're a real estate agent. And when you shift the conversation, whether they love you or not, their automatic triggers to put their dukes up. Like if I say yes or ask a question, they're going to think I'm listing my house right now, and I want to think through this. So you got to remember that just asking a point blank question of, hey, do you have any questions around what's going on in the market? For some people could feel threatening no matter how good your relationship is with them. So I would encourage you to approach that conversation differently. And it could look something along the lines of this. Rusty, I'm going to use you for an example. Hey, Rusty, so excited for your kids to participate in the coloring contest. I can't wait to see what they post.
Oh yeah, they were excited, and I was excited too because it gave me something to entertain them besides myself and schoolwork. So
Okay.
yeah, thank you. That's fun. We're excited.
You're welcome for saving your sanity. Hey, real quickly before I get off the phone with you, as you can imagine, I'm having a lot of conversations with a lot of different people right now, and a lot of my clients are asking me specifically around how this pandemic is going to affect the value of their homes moving forward. And that's, some of those people have been in a position of looking to buy or sell, and some of them are just asking general questions around the market. And I've had a lot of fun in those conversations of helping them get clarity on what's happening in the marketplace right now. So I wanted to follow up with you. I'm sure you have some questions, and I wanted to create a platform for you to be able to ask those questions and see if I can be a resource for you.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we're talking about it all the time, right? You're watching the stock market be so volatile, and you're hearing of people out of work. And I know Utah, our economy has been so strong. It's a little unnerving. You know, we looked at what our house was worth 6 months ago, and you can't help but wonder, did it go down? You know, are we going to crash? Is this going to be 2007 all over again?
Yeah. So pause script there. Thanks, Rusty. So real quickly there, notice something I did. This is an old Zig Ziglar technique that I really love. It's called feel, felt, found. And so instead of me trying to draw feelings out of Rusty and getting it from her, instead it's easier for her to see herself in someone else's shoes that's in a similar situation than me telling her how she feels. So I said, hey, I've been talking to a lot of my other clients about the same thing. So this is someone else that's in your same situation. And I found that, so we found that they were having these questions. And as we had the conversations, they felt that. So as we go through that process, I'm taking and saying, Rusty, other people in your exact same situation asked me these questions, and I was able to provide a resource for them. Can I do that for you? So it's a really simple transition. Any questions or comments on that type of strategy, or other strategies that you guys would want to recommend on how to transition from I'm checking on you, or here's some value, to let me create a platform for a deeper conversation?
Well, so for me, I just jump right in there. One of the best powers we have as agents talking to our sphere of influence, people that we already know, is the fact that they actually should care about us a little bit as well. right? So we've initiated the call. They're inevitably going to turn it around and say, well, Marcus, how are you doing? I appreciate you calling. How are you doing? How's your family? How's work? Is real estate still going well? And now they're giving you permission to have this conversation where you still use the feel, felt, found. You don't dive in and ask that pointed question, because if you go in and say, well, do you have any questions about the market? A lot of times you just use that opportunity as a transition. They'll allow you to transition as long as you've asked genuine questions about their family, how their job is, what they're doing for fun to keep themselves occupied, how are they going to see themselves 6 months from now when this whole thing's over, right? Because when we start looking into that future element of things, that's where you're going to get some insight into where their mind's at. And a lot of times they'll actually get almost, oh, I'm giving them too much information. A lot of people find themselves talking too much and they want to turn around to the other person, right? Some people don't like talking about themselves. So they're going to open that door for you.
Love it. I think that's a really incredible point. And if we got to remember, I don't know if any of you.
A really incredible point. Not
really
just an incredible point, a really incredible
Really
point.
incredible.
Thanks, man.
You guys and your egos need a little stroke. Robert, you're amazing.
Especially me.
The point I want to make with this that I think is really relevant with this is, if any of you have read Brene Brown's book on leadership, it's all about being vulnerable. So you can't ask someone to be vulnerable with you if you're not willing to be vulnerable back. But remember, if two people show up and are vulnerable with each other and you give them the response that they need in their vulnerable state, you actually solidify a relationship with them. It's one person showing up and being vulnerable and the other person refusing to be vulnerable actually repels a relationship. So don't rush through if they're like, yeah, how are you doing with this? Don't be like, things are awesome. I'm doing amazing. Business is incredible. Because we want people to think we're a great real estate agent. Never better. That's going to repel them, particularly even if they're not expressing full uncertainty or how they're feeling in the market. Is be okay to be vulnerable of like, hey, you know what? This is actually ending up to be more challenging than I thought. There's some things actually I've really enjoyed about. Like for me, one of the things I'm really loving about this is I really believe if I had the same opportunity for a conversation 3 weeks ago, we wouldn't have nearly 70 people on this call. The idea of a virtual meeting had less value to you 3 weeks ago than it did today. So I love the idea of where we're progressing virtually. This is a positive thing. There are other things that I'm really missing. I really miss connecting with my people face to face, and it's been a challenge in some ways. So be vulnerable and share back. This is how I'm really feeling about it.
Hey, Marcus.
Yeah, infuse your optimism, Joe.
So one of the other things is if like a client asks me, so how's the market? And I would say, that's a really great question. Let me ask you this first. What's your impression of the market? And the reason why I do that is that I don't want to always assume the worst, right? I want to see where do they feel the market is, and then I can ask them, okay, so what do you think effects that will have on you? Or just another question behind it, just so I just don't want to assume that every single person has the same outlook of what's going on. It's really better to, if they ask you that question, to just acknowledge it, reverse it on them, and then gauge them, and then you can approach them.
That's such a great point, Joe. I mean, I was coaching a group of agents this morning, and I made this exact point that he made the comment, I need to ask him some great questions. And I said, well, pause on that for a second. Do you have the skill set to ask great questions? And he paused on it for a minute. And the thing we've got to realize, and I think, Joe, you're exactly right. When someone asks us a question, that's generally not the real question they want answered. It's a higher level question that they're really trying to get a sub-level question answered. So we need to know, what is the real question behind the question? And the way we uncover that is by asking great questions back. Asking great questions is an acquired skill set. If you're not practicing asking great questions, you're probably not going to ask great questions. You're just going to ask mediocre questions. If you ask mediocre questions, you're going to get mediocre results.
And one other thing too, Marcus, is that remember when you ask a question, you're really asking a question because you want to hear their response. Okay. So don't ask a question just to ask a question and then roll into another question. You have to really acknowledge and listen to their answer and acknowledge it, because if you don't, then you're going to look like you really don't care about what they have to say. You only care about what you have to say next. And that is
That's so good.
point.
Yeah, Joe, that's so good. I stopped talking about the fact that we're in sales. We're so much more. We're actually so much more in a consulting phase, right? And if you were to use the word consulting, go look up the word consulting. It has nothing to do with sales. You're educating, right? And if you think of the best conversationalists are interviewers, right? Barbara Walters, for those of you that was the reign of it, right? Or Oprah Winfrey. But like for me, Lewis Howes or Joe Rogan, when you hear these guys have these interviews, they're not just asking the question to ask the question, right? They want to deep dive into what those answers are and those questions are. And so I listen a lot to those interviewers, not necessarily because their content resonates, because a lot of times it does. It's more entertaining if it does. But I watch how do they structure that? How deep do they go in, and then how do they transition? Because a lot of times we get uncomfortable with the transition, and if we're uncomfortable with transition, so are our clients, right? And so somebody's laughing at me. Stace is laughing at me. Maybe she's not laughing at me, but she's laughing at somebody else. But I think that's a great point, Joe, is that especially early on, we ask questions and then we're just getting the answer and writing it down, and then we move to the next question. But the great questions are the ones where you can dive into. I think it's a really good point, Joe.
Yeah. I just think that I want all of you guys, and I challenge you guys to that, really pay attention to that when you're having a conversation with somebody, that you acknowledge what they're saying and then say that's great, throw it back on them, and then really listen and dig deep into another one, because that's going to be the bridge in bonding you in that relationship so that they really understand that you care about what they're saying.
Beautiful. Let's role play a couple of these questions out. So Robert, coming back to the question you brought up, I think it was in the thread somewhere, was something along the lines of, I was going to list my house for sale and now I don't know what I'm going to do. What was the question? Do you remember?
They just said, are you saying, Marcus, in this class, are you saying that people should not list their house?
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent that we should go back to what they're looking to do. So let's, for role-playing practices, Robert, let's assume that you're a seller and you're coming to me saying, hey, we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about selling my house. I want to wait. And and I'll be the agent. You be you handsome devil. So let's say Robert just brought that to me. I say, hey, Robert, great point. I think this is for sure worthy of a deeper conversation right now because things have significantly changed than when we met a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah. I want to go buy another house. I got to sell this one to go buy another one, but should I wait?
Yeah, great question. So before we jump into making a strategy moving forward, let's actually take a step back for 1 minute and go back to our meeting where we met a couple of weeks ago and we were talking about what your needs were in that moment, because I think the most important thing here is to line up your current needs with the market conditions. Because if you remember 2 weeks ago, that's exactly what we were doing, is we were discovering exactly what your needs were and we were making a strategy based on the market. So a couple of weeks ago when we met, tell me again, what were the top 2 or 3 needs we needed in that moment?
Well, I mean, it was really important at the time that we get as much money out of our house as we could, because we'd like to upgrade our house. That was the main piece, is we'd like to get into something newer. My wife, this was our first home, so it's a little bit small for a growing family, and we never really saw ourselves here for the long term. But at the same time, I'm just concerned that going up in a rung now is not where we should go.
Okay, got it. So there's basically what I heard you say is I heard 2 specific needs there. One is you wanted to get the most money possible out of your current house. And then we had a very specific list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that we outlined were very important for you to move into in your next house, right?
Right.
So regardless of what's changed in the market, has your needs list changed? The strategy is going to change, but before we change the strategy, we have to have a better understanding. Has your needs changed?
Well, I mean, as far as needing, I need a roof over my head, and now I'm concerned how long that'll last if things keep going this way.
Yeah. So you need a roof over your head. You currently have one. So your options are you could stay where you're at. Let me ask the question a little bit differently. Has your ability to execute on your wants, the things you want to do, sell that house, move into another house, has that changed at all based on the current economic situation?
No.
Okay, perfect. So let's move into a conversation around where we're at in the current market. So if you had to give a time frame on when you'd want this to happen, not when you need it to happen, but when you'd want it to happen, has your time frame changed?
No, assuming, no, that hasn't changed. We want to do it.
Okay, awesome. So if you look at the questions I'm asking Robert now, is I'm really trying to figure out what has his needs changed, and from his perspective, they haven't. Some people's will. It will be, hey, I'm worried I'm going to get laid off in a couple weeks. I don't know how long I'm going to be at my job. There's things that could create, like push them into a more urgent, or it could put them into, hey, I lost my job. Or like, I don't know. Because if his answer was like, I really don't know, that puts him in the uncertainty, which by him saying, I don't know, he's giving me permission to ask more direct questions. Robert?
Right. So like, that's actually where my objection was going to be, where I have my guard up. Right. So if I was to show you my card of like what I actually had, when I do script and role playing, I'm looking for red flags. Right. And so for somebody to make a comment of like, well, I need a roof over my head, all of a sudden that's a weird concern that we normally don't hear. Right. So when I hear something like that, there might be a little alarm that goes off and says, okay, something's changed where he's concerned about that. And the simple question is, Robert, so why are you concerned about potentially losing your roof over your head? Because the truth is, in that role play, is I was afraid I was going to lose my job. And so even if Marcus runs me through those wants and needs, in the back of my mind, I might be giving him all the answers he wants, but as soon as I hang up the phone, I'm still going to have that worry about me losing my job or not. So we got to flush some of those things out, and based on their conversation is listening to what they're saying. And anytime you're hearing a weird red flag that you would think is not normal, try to dive into that.
Beautiful. So that's the point there is asking the questions. Robert's right, is as we ask more questions, as you notice red flags, don't assume, be like, hey, does that mean you're going to lose your job? It's asking the question,
Yeah, no.
what can you tell me about that? And a lot of you guys know those are some of my favorite questions, is going like this. What more can you tell me about that? Okay. Is there anything else I should know about that? Because if they already gave their initial answer, now they have to peel back a little bit more. And then you can start bringing in. And as people start answering those harder questions, their fists are doing this just a little bit. And then you get to infuse some market knowledge. So say Robert and I went through that process and we got to the point where he has some fear of losing his job. What did I say? Remind me what field you're in, Robert.
I sell widgets.
You sell widgets. Awesome. Well, number one, thank you for being vulnerable with me and sharing with me that there's some uncertainty about how long you're going to be able to stay in your position. So can I have your permission as your real estate professional and as your friend in this to give you some of my advice on how we approach a solution?
Yeah. I mean, I need somebody to help me with this.
Okay, beautiful. And number one is we're going to work through this together, and we're going to find the best solution for you and your family. So a couple things that I would take into consideration is, as you know, the market is going through a shift right now. And me personally, I still think there's a lot of optimism on the other side of this. The biggest uncertainty we have is how far out is the other side. And that's what we don't know. But one thing I do know, and the reason I asked what field of work you're in again, is it's going to look different for different professions on the other side of this. For example, I have a good friend of mine that's a doctor that right now he's not talking to me worried about loss of income. He's busier than he's ever been because he's in the medical field, and we know that those people are very busy right now. So from your perspective, whether this economic recovery is in 3 months from now or a year from now, from your perspective, you're the expert on widgets. Is there going to be a high demand for widgets on the other side of this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I just don't know if my company is going to be able to have my position. I don't know where I stand on that hierarchy.
Yeah, no, I get that. The reason I didn't ask the question of like, hey, do you have job certainty in your current position, is one of the things we want to look at is what is the long-term play for your family? Because what I don't want to do is rush the wrong decision based on just your ability to stay in your position long enough, but also what is the long-term play for your family? Because we're partners for life, right? This is not about a transaction for me. This is about the rest of our relationship together over the years. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now that you've answered that question, and I agree with you, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are in need of widgets, particularly when consumer confidence comes back. It's something that people have grown accustomed to and they're going to continue to have. I don't know what a widget is in this case, but let's pretend. So that being said, the biggest question you have right now, the biggest uncertainty you have in your world right now is from today to when the economic recovery happens, am I going to be able to maintain my current cash flow, my current economic situation? Am I understanding that correct?
Yeah.
And in the worst case event that you're not able to sustain your economic income right now, you feel confident that on the other side of this, you'll be able to create a new economic opportunity for you.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I think so too. You're a sharp guy. You've got good skill set. We know there's going to be a demand for widget. So there is no pressure for me, but there's two strategies we can take with this. Right now, you're a prime candidate for getting a loan. Interest rates are very low. You've got a good income. You've got good job longevity. You've been there for a while. So right now you have the opportunity to get a loan and close on a house at today's prices and today's interest rates. That being said, if we wait, there's an opportunity, even if it's unlikely, there's an opportunity that if you lose your job, it will make it so it's harder for you to get a loan on the other side of this. Even if you immediately get a job back, it might push out how long it takes for you to be able to get a loan and close on a house down the road. Now, I'm going to support you on either decision. The biggest thing that I would say, if you feel really confident in being able to replace your income in the event that you lost this current position, I think from an economic standpoint, with interest rates where they are, it could make more sense to move quickly on getting a home. But if that makes you feel uncomfortable and you'd rather wait it out, then we can support you on the other side of this. From your perspective, which one of those options do you and your family feel more comfortable with?
I don't know at this point yet. I'm just unsure.
Okay.
I'd have to think through it.
Awesome. So what would you need to know to help create that surety? Generally speaking, when I find people that are in a position of, I don't know which decision to make, it's because there's missing information. So is there some element of information around the market or around, I'll even go research what's going on in the widget industry that I can bring to you to help you get more information? And there's no rush on making a decision for me. I want to be a guide through the process. What can I go get you to help close the gap for you to make the right decision for you and your family?
Well, and I'd give you another objection if we were to keep going down that road. And I could see probably where you're headed. So what I would probably say would give you the path. You're like, no, you don't have to do that. I think if we just catch up in a week or so, I think we'll probably have some clarity around it. I just kind of want to see how this thing plays out.
So that is 99% of the time, that's going to be the answer. Because they're like, I don't want to put you out. I'm processing. It's hard for me to come up with an idea, right? 99% of the time, that's going to be the answer. So what I'm going to do on the other side is I totally get it. I gave you a lot to process. I'm going to go continue to study the market. I'm going to keep you updated on how things are progressing in the market. Is that okay? Tomorrow, yeah. Robert's going to get a link to an article from me on widgets. Hey, I went and did some research yesterday just out of my own curiosity because I want to make sure I'm helping you make the right decision. I thought you'd find interest in this. Does that feel pushy to Robert, or is he like, he really cares about me?
Yeah, definitely a caring type piece to it. One thing, I think it's a dance, right? I always talk about sales and really getting to, because we always go through these ambiguous moments in conversations with clients, right? Where everything's generalized and we can't get into a direct dialogue a lot of times because there's this dance of like, I don't want to be too specific. And I haven't thought enough through this because on the priority of the things in my life that I need to be focusing on, real estate potentially is getting pushed down the list, right? And I think that's where us as agents have this opportunity to where If it's getting pushed down the bottom of the list, that means us having to work a week, 2-3 weeks from now, it's going to be harder to push that priority back up on top of the list. So anybody that was in that A or B world is, as time goes on and we stop talking to them or the market changes, it's going to be pushed down on the priority. We want to kind of try to stay in that priority. But I think it was important that one of the benefits of that conversation was that you were trying to get clarity. You were always trying to get more clarity around my answers, as general as they were. My only feedback was that at a certain point, the dance was too long, right? At a certain point, the dance was too long.
Yeah. So the couple quick things to wrap up here, because we're a little over an hour, is the main underlying issue or message that I want you to be getting from this is it's time to show up like a guide. Your people, or that consultant, as Robert used the word, as the consultant is, the majority of your people are sitting in a state of uncertainty. They're drawing conclusions based on mass media, and what mass media is not taking into account is what are the specific needs of that person. So number one is, if you were not good at lead gen before, it is time to learn that skill. And it is time to start getting on the phone and bringing value to the table and practicing asking great questions and coming from a place of curiosity of wanting to help. One other question that I got that we did not cover is what is this going to do to the values of my home? Again, one of the big things here is to ask what their long-term play is. Realistically, if someone's like, I just bought, like a couple of people asked me, oh, my clients are calling because they just bought a house a couple months ago and they're worried that the value is going down. Well, were they buying it to flip, or were they buying it to live in for the next several years? If they're going to live in it for the next several years, and you need to, I'm telling you this quickly, you need to ask questions that help them see the vision of it, is if the property values does this, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to affect them because it's not taking cash out of their pocket. It's just they're going to ride the wave. Real estate cyclical. Pull up long-term trends and show them what happens. Every time there's something goes on the market, it shifts. One of the things that we didn't get time to talk about today is there's 5 specific reasons this does not look like 2007, that we're in a very different economic position, that this really can't be compared to what happened in 2007. I'm going to do a separate meeting in regards to that. I'll send out a link. I'd love to have you come there, and I'll walk you through those 5 things with specific graphs that you can use in that conversation with your clients. I hope you found value in the conversation today. If you want copies of the slides, make sure to put your email address in the comments before you log off. We'll send you a copy of the slides. And then also, if there's other topics you want to hear us talk about or brainstorm around or bring some ideas to the table around, please also post in those questions in the comments. We are committed to bringing value to the table every single day for you guys. You are our partners, and we want to make sure that we're coming out stronger together on the other side of this and picking up market share and helping more people. Robert, Rusty, or Joe, any last comments from you, my friends?
Hey, one thing I just want to say is exactly like you just said. This class today was birthed out of people asking questions. We're all in this together. You guys, there's people on this call that have been in real estate less than a year, and there's people that have been on the call over 30 years. So some of us have lived through another shift and a recession and other pieces. Some of you only know a great market. The reality is, though, none of us have been in the market we're in right now with a health pandemic worldwide, right? So the questions that you're having, the concerns that you have, what we can do to help, just reach out and tell us, because we can do these exact same formats. We're all in this together. And the more that we learn and grow together, the more we learn and grow together. The biggest, most important piece is we cannot just pretend like nothing's happening. We can't retreat and say, we don't want to do anything. We'll start doing business again in a few months when we can get out and get some fresh air. Right now, you have to stay engaged with your business. It's not an option if you still want to be in business at the end of this year. It's not an option. So that's all I have to say is reach out and let us know what we can do to help. We're all here to do it. And there's no question that's a dumb question, because we're all there.
And the best way to get good on the phones is to actually get on the phone. I got to say, Joe Exotic is killing me down here.
Who is it? I want to know. In our next,
show your face.
Show up in a wrestling mask. Hey, thank you, my friends. Let's go win the day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Jackie, will you stop the recording?
Thanks, Marcus.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.